We were climbing up the highest part of the Chernobyl zone. I was carrying a flag on my back, which sometimes scraped the rails of the stairs. The banner was red, but it had nothing to do with the ideology. At that time, we didn't know any other banners except red. We were dragging it at the top in the honor and for the memory of those who had finished today this inhumanely difficult and deadly dangerous work. People said that it was our common great victory. Perhaps yes. However, for me, it will remain the aggregate of separate personal and individual victories. There were 3,823 of them. This number I will retain in my memory for the rest of my life. I visit Chernobyl often, almost every 2 to 3 years. I understand that the nostalgia for the time of the global catastrophe is, to put it mildly, quite suspicious. But I am attracted by this place as an ex-soldier attracted by the past battlefields. Perhaps that everything that was happening here 25 years ago looked pretty much like war.
Все вы знаете, недавно нас постигла беда. Авария на Чернобыльской атомной электростанции.
26 апреля в час 23 минуты произошла авария.
Многие советские люди, одобряя меры, предпринимаемые государством в связи с аварией на Чернобыльской АЭС,
впервые реально столкнулись с такой грозной силой.
Частичным разрушением активной зоны реактора.
Хотят внести свой личный вклад в ликвидацию его последствий.
Какой является ядерная энергия, вышедшая из-под контроля.
On September 1st, 1986, I was flying on a regular rendezvous with Masha. Lately, I was doing it almost every day. By that time, all that the destroyed reactor had spit out was collected and buried. Now, Bardogliere will work out and will go. Bardoglierame, we called helicopters spraying over the area a special blend of barda, slop, which binded radioactive dust. Today, they were a couple of hours late, and from the top for 5 minutes, I was able to observe the destructive power of the peaceful atom. Well, the corridor is free, and hello, Masha. I feel all of your 1,000 Roentgens by a familiar chill of vile fear. I do not remember who first had the idea to call the working areas on the roofs using female names, but the names remained. Area K, Katya, a weak woman, just up to 1,000 Roentgens. Luda and Nina, more impressive, with 1,500 to 2,000 Roentgens. Well, about Masha, we all spoke only in reverent whispers. We represent a group for dosimetric investigation. 32 volunteers who were to prepare the cleaning of the roofs. All were nothing else but civilians, but in a moment becoming more military. The commander, Yuri Samoylenko, headquarters chief, Viktor Golubev, and the headquarters, a small undamaged room under the roof. Here in this room, decisions are made and the scope of work is determined. Here also the main task is specified. Everything is to be done by the robots. People should be used only in case of emergency. Until that day, everything seemed to go according to plan. Robots were collected from around the world, one by one. It was an ordinary tractor with a remote control cable. It was sheathed in lead, and we attached a bulldozer blade and named it Fyodor. Fyodor worked no worse than the other handsome robots, mounted on a chassis lunar rover, the same one that was deployed on the moon in the mid-70s. However, they worked only in the low-level Katya and Nina regions. Masha still did not allow us to enter. For her, a very special lady, a German police robot with the playful name Joker was bought. Actually, today, I was flying to determine the route for its deployment on the roof. And when I returned, I found out that when it landed, this German robot refused to work. When people ask me what associations I have with Chernobyl, I reply, I associate it with the chime. With ordinary ringing, we signaled to each other about the end of the shift or about the possible dangers. And also with a small Röntgen-level accumulator that each of us was wearing on his chest like a cross, the so-called calculator of life.
Да, они заряжены и выставлены на 10 рентген. Это самая высокочувствительная зона. От 10 рентген до 20. Это наибольшая точность показаний прибора. Сейчас у нас сразу 10.
Every night we took records and noted in the journal the dose received every day. Gradually, it increased and achieved the maximum permissible threshold, 25 rem. After that, the man had to be taken away from the area, or as we called it, discarded. It was an interesting threshold. Some deliberately overcame it. They did not take the X-ray calculator on their ships, knowing that if they would be discarded, recruits who had no experience would be forced to begin work anew. Others asked people going to work to take their calculators with them. We did not refuse. It is useless to keep an unreliable person, so that these devices measured not only the level of radioactivity, but the level of human dignity. After working in the zones with high radiation, you begin to understand that radiation is not only dangerous, but also insidious. It seemed to affect even the psyche. Sometimes an experienced, well-trained person, in the most crucial moment, suddenly lost his self-control, made a lot of mistakes, and he was lucky if it finished with just injury. That is why we were desperately pulling robots to clean roofs. For God's sake, not to leave this work for people. And this despair resulted in the most incredible, adventurous projects.
Вот эта зона дезактивирована. Эта зона и эта зона. Вот здесь видите, по флажкам здесь немного, да? Так. На нее ставим ДШК. Калибра 12,7 с разрывными пулями. Ну, почему разрывные? Чтобы не было рикошетов. И обрабатываем вот этот вот завал. Здесь перебиваем трубопроводы, которые лежат. Графитовые блоки в муку толкем. С этой стороны. А дальше гидромонитором смываем. А здесь роботом сдвигаем сюда до завода.
Of course, for robots, it was easier to handle the small fragments. And of course, we were not allowed to shoot in the blocks with a gun. At the same time, we were pressed. Do it faster. The country can no longer stand this nightmare. Despite the protests of Samoylenko, we had to release the Joker right on the graphite debris. There he stuck. Yuri Samoylenko, our civil general. Every time when people had to work on the roofs, he felt defeated as a person. He would be awarded the Hero of Socialist Labor, but he would never wear it. We knew that if the robots would not handle it, then a mass of people would be launched on the roofs. A relevant order had already been prepared by the governmental commission. The German robot was our last argument to avoid it. But first, Joker had to be revived. And it could be done only by the bio-robots. In other words, by us and by the soldiers who helped us. The last mission of the operation to free the Germans from Soviet captivity was given to me. Previous three-man teams managed to attach the robot to the windlass, and now we had to pull it free. The truth is that it wasn't very successful. In the remote control office, they also could not determine the cause. The camera had a limited view, and I had to make a so-called visual inspection and get more closely acquainted with the Joker. From the winch to the chimney, it was around 70 feet. You can approach around 10 meters. No more. A little bit more. All right, stop. You can't go any further. Here it is, our cutie. It has overridden a graphite block with its right caterpillar track, and now is sitting on 12,000 Roentgen fragment, like a hen on its nest. I'm adjusting the operator's work by radio, and there below, the guys are already able to work synchronously with the winch. Come on, guys, come on. I hear Golubev's voice distorted by interference. And, as if in response to these spells, the guys really starts to show signs of life. Vitya Golubev, a desperately brave man. He was ready to climb to the Joker by himself, but he must not. He has already accumulated as many REMs as bees on honey. Vitya will die a few years later, not quite 48 years old. Now, quickly back. It's good that I was lightly clad. Thus, I've saved 10 to 15 seconds. But the boiler suit will need to be deactivated. Translating this scientific term into common language, just buried in a special waste burial place. I do not remember how many such procedures I have already made, but today my undies and t-shirt will die an untimely death. The Joker, freed with so much pain, still failed to work. Some idiot trying to prove to the world that there can be no global catastrophes at Soviet nuclear power stations, underrated by a factor of 10 the radiation levels in its application. The pedantic Germans have programmed a robot in accordance with the order, and Joker died suddenly. The electronic brains of this guy burned out, so my heroic escapade was a bust. And also, we pulled the soldiers to the winch for nothing. We just had to keep silent while their commander took it out on us.
Надо инженерные расчеты, чтобы воины работали, а не заниматься болтологией. И хватит от армии отдуваться. Загнут, блядь, от фонаря, а я иду сражаюсь. Закажу солдатка. Мы перешли солдату, мы здесь уже.
We were told to go to hell quite often. Indeed, we did not always restrain from cursing either. It was almost normal in such tense, almost unpredictable situations. But today, to hell was sent all that we're rushing for almost 2 months on the roofs of this damn station. We have lost. An incorrigibly optimistic Golubev was still trying to call somewhere and to prove something. But Samoylenko was already thinking about something else. What all of us have already known, robots failed, and the extra radioactive zones will have to be cleaned by men. The stupid pathological secrecy has become almost our national trait over the years. In Chernobyl, I felt this particularly clearly. First, they barefaced lied to the world that nothing terrible had happened, and then each month they had assured us that the radiation levels were almost normal. Forget about the rest of the world, but they could have told the truth to their own people. Thousands of bewildered people expected and hoped. I will remember for a lifetime the notes on the gates of the abandoned houses. No dog in the yard. Already killed. Close the wicket, please. No dogs. Please do not hurt the cat, or mice will eat everything. It was a strange, sophisticated game of fate. I've seen this already. I was 13 years old when my grandmother and I went to a small Ural settlement of Kasli, where my grandfather is buried. On that day, the accident occurred at the Mayak plant. It was a secret enterprise producing plutonium-238. However, nobody talked about it. In the settlement, we were stopped without explanation, taken to the railway carriage, standing on the nearby rails, and dressed in some old clothes. My brand new suit, together with a dozen houses around the plant, was quietly buried near my grandfather's cemetery. Very few people, even today, have heard anything about that accident. In the year 1957, it was still possible to hide, but in 1986, I was personally building the grandiose monument to the bitter mixture of villainy and heroism.
Вас понял. 5 минут ждем, докладываем.
September 17th, 1986. For the first time since the beginning of the accident, the area under the roof at the entrance to the M zone was crowded. By order of the government commission, the army was sent on the offensive. General Tarakanov was commanding the operation.
Значит, страшного, конечно, ничего там нет. Это ясно.
I listened to Tarakanov, and I thought that probably this same way they tried to hearten the People's Volunteer Corps of the patriotic war before sending them to blast the tanks with bottles of Molotov cocktails. However, what else could the general do in this situation where the old saying, trouble will teach, has become the main postulate of the survival theory? Not enough radio sets, they used the rail. No radiation protection suits, they made the protective suits out of lead sheets by hand. Front strap, back plate, folding vest on the chest and back. But the main intimate detail of the lead costume was what the guys ironically called the egg basket. The name is a bit scabrous, but very exact. On top of all this, they were wearing a rubber apron, and with a shovel in hand, they went on their dates with Masha. The shift lasted only 2 minutes. But I've dreamt of those 2 minutes for the past 25 years. Every night, again and again, I accompany these people to that terrible M zone, the area covered in graphite debris. Here, the unthinkable background radiation of nearly 8,000 Roentgens. 20 meters away from us is the naked muzzle of the destroyed reactor. My task is to show what must be removed there first. With each succeeding group, with each fragment removed, the background radiation will reduce. This means that the risk for the next group will already be lower. I will transfer a few hundred people through the zone. I will not know who they are, and I will not see their faces behind protective masks, and will never know what is going to happen to them afterwards. It was not me who had made a decision to send these men in the zone of mortal danger, but each night, some inexplicable feeling of guilt brings me back to the past, in that first 2-minute shift, which stretched out for me for a quarter of a century. bio-conveyor worked flawlessly. Sometimes the shifts were compressed to a minute, and sometimes lasted merely 15 to 20 seconds. But these seconds grew to hours, hours to days, and Masha's poisonous breath was gradually weakening. Although only the devices felt it, perhaps for the first time in military history, the Army was fighting against an invisible enemy and an invisible danger, which was insidiously instilling in soldiers the sense of complacency. General Tarakanov was trying to curb such complacency, but boys will always be boys.
Вам отводится 1 минута для того, чтобы решить следующую задачу. Вот посмотрите за своими товарищами, как они ускоренно передвигаются из этой амбразуры, поворачивают направо за вот это сооружение и попадают вот в район работ. Вот он, район работ. Видите? Район работ. Еще раз показываю вам. Вот он.
Nikolai Tarakanov. A few days ago, he was the first to go on the roof to see where his soldiers would be sent. I think he understood it. That is why he was personally instructing each group. 100 times a day, he repeated with a hoarse voice the same words, and sometimes it seemed to me that he was saying a prayer, a clumsy, rough soldier's prayer. I hope for the health.
Выводной. Так, за мной, товарищи солдаты. Вы знаете, что люди наши устали от этой аварии, что никогда мы с ней разделаемся, и солдатам доверено это серьезнейшая задача.
Теперь, как только вы подниметесь на лестницу, не торопитесь сразу кидаться на работу. Зайдите за трубу в восточную часть и отдышитесь.
В этом районе работ лежат блоки. Понятно? Квадратные такие блоки весом примерно по 40, по 50 километров.
Ребята, здесь есть, вот тут вот есть дыра в площадке. Смотрите, не оступите.
Итак, вам жизни надо эту минуту отработать так, чтобы осталось память и сделать.
Да, наладите дыхание и потом пошли сюда.
Металлические предметы никакие не брать в
Да,
руках.
как можно дальше завал, это там
Графин,
где максимальное количество.
Какие у вас есть вопросы?
So in the fall of 1986, 3,828 people passed through the roofs of the Chernobyl power station. The heroes who saved the world, the newspapers would write in a pathetic manner. In some years, the heroes will no longer be remembered, and then they will be completely forgotten. That's really where life is cheap. However, much more important for a person is what he himself appreciates in this life, and not how much someone evaluates his life.
Вы выполнили поставленную задачу. Выполнили на отлично. Я поздравляю вас с выполнением этой задачи. Желаю вам хорошего здоровья, долгих лет жизни. Все вы награждаетесь премией 800 рублей. Спасибо, лейтенант.
Служу Советскому Союзу.
Спасибо. Спасибо. Спасибо.
Служу Советскому Союзу.
Спасибо. 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 Спасибо.
Служу Советскому Союзу.
Спасибо. 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 Спасибо.
Our group was disbanded and discarded at the end of November. On that day, the alcohol for the decontamination of instruments for the first time was used by us not in a proper way. I was drinking in the circle of aristocrats. We never used to say roofs radiate in the professional jargon that sounded simply, they shine, hence the titles. If you've received up to 100 rems, Your Highness. You've picked up more already, Your Excellency. That's all the baggage we had when departing. Did I know how it might end? Did I understand that there would be hospitals ahead, the infinite visits to doctors, and finally disability? Probably not. I buried such thoughts and believed that fate would spare me. She had not. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Even if I knew, I would have gone nonetheless. Today they ask me for what. I don't know what to answer. It is impossible to explain. Each man must answer such questions for himself.